All right. Good morning. Welcome to Studio Time with Deb, the online version. Today we are talking about engineering a pendant. So, benefits of making a pendant. One of the things is you only have to make one of the little buggers. It's not like earrings where you need two that match or that correspond or that something else. It's not like a bracelet where you make different panels or you have to go all the way around. And a pendant is simple. It's a little thing, hangs in front, usually only one direction. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy. So being a solitary item, it can be really quite the focal point of whatever it is that you're doing. You can have a very simple chain, even a pre-made chain, but the focal point is that pendant. So that's really all that you need to work on and all you need to think about. However, it comes with some real engineering issues and some design considerations that you need to think about. You need to think about how it's going to hang. Do you want it to wiggle and jiggle? Do you want things to move around? Or do you want it to be extremely stable when it's there so that it always hangs in the same place, in the same orientation? Do you want it to be able to turn around? Do you want the chain to show? Do you want it to hang high on the chain? High. Do you want it to hang really low so that it hangs down, really low thing? Do you want it to twist and turn? So these are all things that you need to decide before you do the engineering. If you don't decide these things and figure out where you're headed, then you can't engineer it properly. So you need to think about all of these issues and how it's going to hang, how it's going to look, where you want it to hang, what you want it to be. What I do, I'm going to start the screen share. Okay. What I do and what I recommend that students do is that you draw a neck wire. And this is one shape. I have several shapes here. And I just do this on a blank white piece of paper. Okay. Another little shape, another little shape. And then what I can do is I can take my pendant and I can put it here. I can put it down low. I can put it to the side. I can put it wherever. And once I figure out what I want that to look like, then I can start figuring out how to make it work. Okay. The next thing I need to decide is, do I want this to sit so that the wire or the necklace comes through the piece? Do I want this to hang so that it hangs slightly off the neck wire or chain? Do I want it to hang long off the neck wire or chain? So the next thing you're going to decide is how wiggly jiggly do you want it to be? If you've got a pendant, so this is a really boring pendant, but it's okay. If you've got a pendant and you hang it with one point in the middle at one little area, it is going to wiggle and jiggle something fierce. It's going to turn up and down. It's not going to be a very stable piece. And that's fine. Some pieces you want them to wiggle and jiggle, and that's just great. But you need to know that that's going to happen. If you do 2 points of attachment, especially if they're far out at the ends like this one, that's going to be a very stable piece. The one thing that you need to recognize about this is that the neck wire or the chain is going to go right across here. It's going to be visible. And sometimes that's really desirable too. A lot of times that can be part of the piece. So you can integrate that into the design and that works just fine. This one is a tube, and this one again is very stable. This one you don't see the chain because the chain is in the tube and the chain comes up from here and up from here. And there's lots of other variations on these. These are just ones that I gave you as basics to think about and think about decisions that you need to make prior to the engineering of it. This was an engineering flow chart that I thought that was kind of apropos to what we do. Does it move? No. Should it? No. Okay. Does it move? No. Yes, it should. WD-40. Does it move? Yes. Duct tape if it shouldn't. So this doesn't really work for us, but kind of. These are how's it hanging tweezers. I think pretty much all of you have these. If you don't, talk to me after class or talk to me later and I'll tell you how to do it. These are the cheap $3 tweezers from Rio. And what I do is to bend the ends in right here. I dull the ends a little bit with a file or sandpaper, and then I bend them in so that they touch each other. And what that does, there's 2 more shots of them. What that does is that it allows me to put those tweezers and then wiggle something so that I can see how it's going to hang if I hang it from one point. These work great for earrings, for a pendant, for anything like that. And it lets you know where to attach the bail. Or how it's going to hang, because sometimes they're really off center. They're very different than you think they're going to be. There you get a better view of it. So what I'm going to do now is go through a whole lot of slides, and I'm going to talk to you about the pendant, about the attachments, and about ways to think about it. If they're going to wiggle and jiggle, if they're going to be stable, what's going to happen with it. This one wiggles and jiggles a lot. It is stable on the pearls right here. It slips over the pearls. That's stable. This is a ring that's soldered on. This is soldered on. The downside for this one is that you can see this wire starts in the front here, and it comes over and it goes to the back of the bezel. Now, this bezel is not very wide right here. It's probably 1/8 of an inch, but that is enough that it makes this pendant twist a little bit. Something to think about. So what I ended up having to do was to come in here and really twist this part in order to make that sit properly. This is one where visually you want the neck wire to or the chain to be part of the piece, that this line follows right here. And this line doesn't follow, but it complements what's going on here. So if you look at the back of this, it's just got 2 little rings that are soldered on, and then the chain comes off of that. We're going to go back to the front. So you can see how that corresponds to the piece. So that's a piece of carved onyx, and it's 14 karat gold and a brown diamond. And
Deb, what were the rings for on the back?
To hold the chain so that it moves some, because I didn't want the chain to be fixed to it. I wanted it to move.
I see it goes through there. Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you can see how this does correspond, and when it's being worn, this makes one solid line, and this one makes this jog that's really nice. So this is another one. This is where the pendant is in line with the chain going around and the beads, pearls going around. But on this one, the connections need to be up high. If they're not up high, if they were here in the middle, this piece would tend to fall over. So I need to have the connections up here, up a little bit high. And when I do that, it looks like the thing is still in line. It looks like it reads as being in line, while really on the back, it's not. There you can get a better view of it. This is another one where it looks like they're in line, but really the center of gravity, if you look, the connection is way up here. But because of the way the beads go and the pearls go, it looks like everything is just in line, like it's one solid line of things. And then the clasp reads the same. You can see the clasp up here, so that it looks like one solid circle. And this is, you can see too, right here, it looks like it just follows on around, right? And it's got a little bit down here, but it just follows straight around. When actually, if you look at center of gravity from here to here, it's on the top third of the piece, which is what we want for the connections if we want them to be stable and not turn. So this is one that turns on purpose. This is basically a bead. It's a metal clay piece, and it turns around, and so that it's always changing as you're wearing it. And that's another consideration for a pendant, is that there's no reason that it has to be fixed. There's no reason that you can't say, I want this one to flip around. I want this one to be different every time I wear it. Now, that being said, if I made this so that there were a lot more coils and whatnot on one side than on the other side, it's always going to hang down. In order to have it flip around and do whatever, it needs to be pretty equal weight all the way around. So that's something I need to think about. This is another one that does the same thing. This one does hang down for the most part, and you can see because the hole here and the hole here are not in the middle. If one of these holes was down further, this bead would turn easily. As it is, it pretty much stays stable. So that's something to think about. If you want it to turn, what you need to do is that you need to make it so that the weight is equal and the holes are even. And so your weight distribution is even, and then the piece will flip around. This is an interesting one because it hangs straight. And we've talked about this one a little bit before, but I want to talk about it in terms of the engineering of it. And that is, this bail is a little bit wide, not super wide, but a little bit wide. That's going to make the whole piece a little bit more stable. It makes it a little bit more forgiving where I put it. So I can have this piece look straight because this piece is wider. If this piece was very narrow, then its placement is absolutely critical where it goes in order to have the pendant hang straight. And the reason this one hangs straight is because this point of attachment and where it attaches to the chain is directly above the center of gravity of this piece of the pendant. So if you look, it's a little bit over to the side here because it's got this stone, it's a little bit heavier. So it's a little bit off center for the center of gravity. And that's what makes that piece hang evenly. This is one that is made from a forged wire. It's a forged tapered wire. And the pendant and the bail and everything is all one piece that it wraps around. This piece, because it wraps around so much, I should have a side view of it and I don't. But because it does, sometimes tends to lay a little bit sideways. And because this coil right here is so large. So that's something that you need to think about also. If you take a tube and you put a tube on the back of a piece, or if you take a piece like this, where it's coiled up like this, and then it's got a flat part here, if this flat part is narrow, this piece often will fall over a little bit. It'll lay down. It won't sit up the way you want it to. So what you can do is take the coiled part and turn it into an oval, make it much flatter, and then the piece will hang flatter. This one does not hang flat, but it doesn't matter because look how the whole piece is about volume and it's about standing off your chest. So this is another one that's made from a tapered forged wire, and the end of the taper was melted and hammered. And you can see that the bail is at quite an angle. So the whole piece is just twisted, but the whole piece lays off your chest so much. And if it turns and twists, it really doesn't matter because this piece is all about movement and it looks very musical to me. It's very, very lyrical. And so it twists and turns and it's fine. It works really well. So that's what you have to, one of the things you have to think about when you're designing these is how much do you want it to move? Where do you want it to move? Do you want it to be able to twist and turn? Do you want it to lay flat? This one I wanted to lay flat. And so it's got a large tube on the top and a very large chain that fits through. There is no chance of this one flipping over. It's not going anywhere. It's very stable. This one, look at this. This is meant to, obviously, because it's thread, it's meant to wiggle, jiggle, move around, do whatever. And even to wiggle, jiggle that maybe this isn't straight. Maybe this goes, changes a little bit. Maybe it's up the side a little bit. And that's fine too. But you do need to take that into account when you're doing your engineering. You need to think about, is this going to travel up my neck? Now, one of the things to think about when you're thinking about whether it'll travel or not is that if the pendant, this part down here, if that is not the heaviest part of the necklace, if something up here is heavier, it's not on this one, but if it were, if this was heavier, then the necklace is always going to crawl down. That heavy part is going to always want to be at the bottom. So you need to think about that when you're thinking about your pendant and you're thinking about how you want it to hang. If it's not the heaviest part, then you've got to figure out what's going to make it stable and what's going to make it stay there. or you're going to accept that it's going to travel. This one, if this hung just by one point right here, it would wiggle and jiggle something fierce. Because it's hung so far away with these so separated like this, it's a very stable piece. It's going to absolutely stay fixed. It's going to stay frontwards. It's going to stay down. And then look at the neck wire, that the neck wire becomes an integral part of the piece. That if you took that neck wire away, the piece does lose something. The neck wire adds to what's there design-wise. This is one where the neck wire goes through the piece. And one of the things that you need to think about when you're engineering this is, do you want to see this right here? See that? Do you want to see that or not? And if you don't mind seeing that, then great, that's what you're going to do. If you want it up a little higher, you need to engineer that. If you want it down a little lower, you're going to need to engineer that and recognize that you're going to see that neck wire through the open design. So you need to think about what the neck wire, the impact, the effect that it has on your design. And if you want it to have an impact, a lot of times, and I'll show you in future slides, the bales, I make some bales that are really long bales. And part of that is because I want to get that pendant away from that neck wire. I want the pendant to be removed from that, and then it's its own entity further away.
Deb, on that last one, did you have a picture of the back? What was that? That's two pieces of silver folded, right?
I don't think they're folded. I think they're I think they're soldered together, but they're separated. I can't tell. I have not seen this piece for real. I can't tell if they're soldered here at the points or if they're if it's got a little ball or peg or something in here to separate them.
Okay.
But it's got something up top and in the bottom, and the up top one I know because that's what the neck wire rides on.
Okay.
Could it be hollow ware?
I'm sorry?
Could it be hollow ware?
I don't know if you'd consider this hollow ware or not. It's kind of marginally hollow ware because it doesn't have sides on it. I don't know. So this piece, you can see that the neck wires again are kind of part of the piece, that when this overlays it like this, that it becomes part of what draws your eye into here, and the gold, these gold pieces accent that as well. It kind of sends your eye up, sends your eye down, and then back down into here and into the piece. But this is one that you could play with. She could have taken this one and extended this bar way up so that this piece was way down below the neck wires. And that's a completely different look. Both of them are great. Both of them are fine. It's just some decisions that you need to make, and then you can make decisions about how to connect the piece. So on this one, there's likely 2 jump rings, one here, maybe only one. And if there is only one, it's a little bit wiggly, but that's okay too. So whether it's connected to this one or this one, I'm not sure. And what you would have to, it's probably connected to this one, the far right on your screen. And the reason I say that is because if I follow this line down, that's about where the center of gravity is, right? If I'm over here, it would tilt more. So I will bet that the ring is right there behind that. And that's what I mean with that's the How's It Hanging tweezers would take care of that, would let you know exactly where that needs to be. This is another one that the connection isn't visible at all, but the chain leads down into it. And then that's especially important with this little gold ring here and the little gold dots, that all ties together and it becomes an integral part of the piece without being soldered to it, without being the same as the pendant. So this one probably just has a jump ring back behind it that everything is connected to, or it could have a hook so that it's removable. That would work too. This one could be worn high, could be worn low, depending on how long the chain is. So those are engineering things to look at. When you hang something off one loop of a chain that you've got, you also need to, engineering wise, recognize that these chains right here, the next ones up, are going to overlap. And if the chain is long, then probably 2 or 3 of them are going to overlap. And depending on what you've done with that, you need to make sure that they're going to lay the way you want them to. This is one where the chain comes down into here. There's a connection, probably a tube or something across here. But this, with the jump ring and this, means that this part is probably very stable and will stay put. And this part on down wiggles, jiggles, and moves around something fierce. So it's probably a really interesting piece to wear and to see on somebody, because the top part is stable and the bottom part is wiggly. These are meant to wiggle, these guys, and when they're laid out like this, it's a little bit misleading, because when you wear these, they are going to overlap. They are not going to lay out like this. So one of the things that's a little bit difficult when you do pieces like this that are on a ring where there's multiple pieces is that you need to play around a lot with the diameter of this ring, because the diameter of this ring determines whether these here have a gap here, whether how they lay on each other, whether they overlap each other or not. And then again, notice there's two, well, this ring is connected to one ring here. Notice that these overlap again. So this is going to wiggle jiggle a lot. And this definitely is, because it's designed to do that. Sometimes one piece will be in front, sometimes another piece will be in front. They're just going to change. They're going to be all over the place. Same with this one. It's nice to lay them out for the photograph. That's not how they're going to look when they're worn. So what you need to do is to figure out if that's what you want when it's being worn, that they are going to change from each other and everything else. So this piece being very big and very wide, if, let's say these two little diamonds here, if they were put right next to this piece, then there's times when it would go underneath it. The way she's got these arranged, this piece may go underneath, but if it does, the pearl is still going to show because it hangs out longer, right? This one probably won't go underneath everything. It might go underneath this, but probably not. This one will probably go underneath this one occasionally, but that's what you need to play with, is the order they go in. You need to think about what I do usually with ones like this is I play with different size rings up here, number one, and then I play with order and spacers. And what I do is move them around a lot. I jiggle them around to see what they're going to do so that I get an idea of what's happening. This one is ultra stable. It's not going anywhere. Everything is soldered. There's no jump rings. It is not moving. And it is the heaviest thing. It's going to hang right there. This one. So there's a clasp back here, and there's this piece up front. Let's see if I can blow it up a little bit. So this piece is going to slide on this a little bit, but not a lot, because the weight is going to tend to keep it even. The weight is going to tend to keep it down in front, and it'll just ride on that tube. This one, I do want you to notice that the connection is part of the piece. I mean, actually, if that wasn't a pendant, if you took it and put a pin back on the back and it was a brooch, that tube you wouldn't think of as a bail at all. That it serves as a bail is great, and it just is integral to the design of the piece, but it could just as well be without being a bail. It could just be, you know, design wise, just part of the piece. This one, when you hang it on either side like this one is absolutely stable. The one thing that you do want to be careful of is that you don't want to be very far down on this. This one is halfway, which is, I don't think it's going to fall over, because I think you're going to still feel it connected up here. I don't think it can fall over. But this one is going to be very, very stable, having the chain come off the sides of it like that. This is another one that's going to wiggle around a lot, and they're going to overlay a lot, and they're not always going to be in the same order. So you need to figure out, when you're doing one like this, you need to figure out and sort out how they overlay, if they're going to show, how much they're going to show, if they lay in the order you want them to. This is one I was working on a long time ago, and I just wanted to show you the bail. So the bail is made out of silver wire that's very similar to this, just kind of coiled and whatnot. But it's the placement of the bail. So, and then also the width of the bail. Because of the width of the bail, this piece is more stable than you might think. Because it's not just one wire or one little point, it's actually got some width to it. So that keeps it a little bit more stable. And then the placement, you can see, is it's not in the center of the piece, it's over a bit, and that's because there's more wire here than here. The center of gravity of the piece is off a little bit right there. This is another one. I want you to notice these chains overlapping. That's going to happen anytime you do this, and you can see on the big ones it's much more visible. So you need to think about, when you hang something off of a chain like this, a handmade chain, is this a look that you want, this overlapping chain look? There's nothing wrong with it. I think it looks great, but you need to think about if that's something that you want to have happen or not. And if not, then you probably would have 2 points of connection here, with the chain coming down to here and the chain coming up from here. If you do 1 point of attachment like this, you're always going to get this overlapping chain. With bigger loops, you're going to get a lot more of it than with the smaller loops. Same thing here. Notice the 2 bails on this. That's going to make this piece significantly more stable than 1 bail. If it just had 1 wire there, it would be much wigglier. This is a Roger Reimel piece, and what I want you to notice on this is the neck wire cutting through here. So what he has chosen to do is to, right here is a jump ring where this goes on the back side, where this goes through. And what he's chosen to do is to integrate that neck wire so that it becomes part of the visual tension of this pendant. So part of the pendant is above the neck wire, part of it is below, but the neck wire is an important part of this design. This design without that neck wire is not as interesting. The neck wire adds to the design. And Roger's really good at that. This is Allison Antelman. She folds forms these little guys. But what I want you to notice on hers is this is cable. Like this is cable right here. So this piece is going to wiggle around some, not a lot, because cable is more stable than, say, chain or something. But this is very stable right here. But what she's done is connect this. So it's going to tend not to flip over sideways. It's going to tend to move from side to side. It's going to tend to swing a little bit. This is Monica's piece, and I want you to notice that where she chose to hang this on the neck wire really affects the piece. That by having this stone and then it leads up into here, that by having these lead up into here, it's a very different looking piece than if she had just done something and put a bail on the top of it and hung it down low. And it's, both of them are fine. It's just something to think about. It's a very different looking piece. This is what I was talking about a longer bail. So I really love these longer stones, these really long marquee stones, or some of the longer rectangular stones. And I like to put a long bail on them because when I have a neck wire, it's way up here. And what I want is a little bit of visual separation often from the neck wire or the chain to the pendant. So I will even narrow this, make that a really design tension point, and then have the pendant part there. This is one, this is gold and silver and Tahitian pearl. The chain runs through it. And with this, that kind of, again, makes it integral to the design because you've got all of these wrapping around, and this basically just wraps around the chain as it comes through here. So there's a lot of these. This one will flip over. Half the time you'll see the back of the stone and half the time you'll see the front of the stone. It'll just flip and do whatever it wants. That's not necessarily bad. You just need to, engineering wise, understand that that's going to happen when you hang something like this. So if you don't want it to do that, if you want it to hang forward, you need to put another jump ring in here. But visually, that's not as nice as just hanging this piece on there. So, you know, you got to make your choices. But these are things to think about for engineering these. This is another Roger piece. And again, look at the neck wire going through the piece. Definitely makes a visual statement. Definitely a choice. This one he chose not to. Left that complete circle with the gold down there. But again, notice the tension, the visual tension of having this curve and this curve. Really nice. I love his work. This one is stable again because it's separated like this. If there was one bail here, just one, it would wiggle, jiggle, move around. But because of these two, it works pretty well. And this one, so the center of gravity, they've got it about slightly off the hole. I think this one works. This one worries me. Well, no, I know why this works. This works because this piece over here is not part of this piece. This piece is part of the bail. See how the bail is soldered on there and there? Right there, right there. So this piece is part of the bail that goes on there, and then this just hangs on the bail. And that's why it hangs evenly. This one. So again, this is spread far apart right here, all the way far apart. And then it hangs from multiple places. So this is going to be extremely stable. It's not going to go anywhere. This will wiggle, jiggle forward to backward, but it won't wiggle side to side and it won't move around much on the neck piece. Same with this one. So these are just things you need to think about. There's not a right answer and a wrong answer. They're things you need to think about when you're thinking about designing your connections and designing your pendant. This is another one. Again, the rubber cord really is integral to the design. It cuts through, it's visible through the top part of the design. Because it's got the two pieces that are spaced, it's relatively stable. This one is going to wiggle jiggle a little more than most because it's only got the one point of attachment right here. So it's going to tend to move a little bit more. It looks to be heavier, which will tend to hold it down. This one, by having the 2 points, not only design-wise does it complement what's going on in the pendant, but it does keep it a little bit more stable. This one, so there's a wire that comes up the front and then bends and goes down the back. This one, if this wire is properly bent up here, and I don't know if it is, I've never seen this piece for real. If it is, this will hang straight. If this is just standard bent, this piece is going to tend to want to curve and bend over and possibly flip over. So this is one that you need to think about and possibly do some carving up here so that on the front piece, you'd carve the left side out, and on the back piece, you'd carve the right side out so that the chain would go through perpendicular to the way that you want this piece to hang. This one hangs evenly because the point of attachment is really right here. This just is a vine or a whatever going up the top, so you can ignore that. It hangs right here, comes on down, and so that's pretty much the center of gravity of the piece. So while it looks like it shouldn't hang evenly, it will, because it's that last point where it hits the chain that really matters. This is one I made some time back, and it's got a super long bail. See the super long bail? And part of what it does is it wiggles and jiggles a lot, and partly because it is so long from the chain itself, that even with the width that it's got here, it tends to move around. It doesn't, so this one comes and it sweeps around the side. So it's kind of a circle back here. It's kind of a big, it lifts it off your chest quite a bit right here. But because this is so long and this is wide enough, it doesn't tend to flip over. It tends to stay put. It's just that it does move a fair amount. This one, again, notice the really long bail. And what that does is to just separate your eye from the chain so that the chain is not an integral part of this piece. I showed you that one earlier. This is another one. I want you to look at the center of gravity. So this is the jump ring, and the chain goes through here, and the center of gravity cuts right through there. And that's where it hangs evenly. This one wiggles all over the place. This one, it's got a big jump ring here. It's got the forged wire here. You put a chain through here. It is going to, it doesn't flip over. It stays stable because of the width of this. It doesn't go anywhere, but it does swing side to side. It swings around a lot. It's very flashy. One thing I do want you to notice on this is the stamping. This is that tool that I made that is narrow on one end and wide on the other end. This one is really interesting. So this is just a hole through the rectangular wire, but it's going to hang straight because look, the center of gravity is straight up and down through here. Now it's going to wiggle around some. It's not going to flip over because the piece is too big, but it is going to wiggle around side to side a little bit. But the center of gravity on this one is a really interesting thing to look at. So now we're back to a bead, and this is designed, this one in particular is designed to flip around. So this is fold formed and then synclastically raised into the bead, and it moves around so that you can see this line as it moves around. These are more, remember I talked to you about the chain overlapping? This is the solution to that if you don't want it to do that, is that you put a hook or a jump ring here and here, and you attach the chain here and here. Now we don't have overlapping chain. And since this is doubled chain, if it was doubled and overlapping, that would be a bit much. So this one is single, but still the same. It's attached here and here. That also makes a very, very stable piece. The one thing you do need to be very careful about on these is that this pendant must be significantly heavier than the rest of it, or it's going to tend to crawl up and move on you. These are some hollow forms and some, I'm not even sure what that is in the middle. But look how they're hung on the chain. So this one is like a bead. This one and this one, the chain goes through. This is a hollow form. I can see it's got sides on it here. So these just ride on that chain. So they're up tight, up close. This is a Joanna Goldberg. And again, you need to be careful that this is the heaviest part of the piece. And if so, it'll tend to stay down. I believe on hers that it's not the heaviest part. It tends, this one, you can wear it with this on the side and it'll tend to stay put. I believe that this one is maybe slightly heavier than all of these pieces, but not a lot heavier. So if you want to wear this one off center, you can do that. And I believe she does that intentionally so that you can choose to wear it how you want, whether you wear it off to the side a little bit or whether it's straight down. This is one, it won't flip over. It won't wiggle and jiggle much. It's the point of attachments are way out to the side, and it'll tend to stay straight and it'll tend to stay down because this stone is significantly heavier than this chain. This is April Audie's work. Again, on something like this, what you need to think about is these attachments and how they're going to overlay. They're separated in the picture, and that's nice so that you can see them. But when you're wearing them, they're not going to look like that. That's not how it's going to work. So when you put a piece on like this, and it's next to a piece like this one is either going to be, it's going to hang right here. It's either going to be behind it or it's going to be in front of it. And you need to figure out how you want that to look and what you want it to be. And that's design issues that you should sort out before you give in, you know, wear it or give it to a customer or whatever. This is another one, and this is interesting. So this whole part up here is extremely stable because it's got the 2 points of attachment that are fairly far apart. But then this jump ring and this jump ring means that this piece will swing from side to side pretty easily. So it'll move around a moderate amount. This one is extremely stable. It's going to stay put. It's in line with the other pieces. You can see the jump ring right there where it attaches to the chain. This is a Joanna Goldberg. This one is obviously extremely stable, although these do wiggle a little bit just because they're all connected with jump rings and crimp beads and whatnot. I can't imagine building that. It's a wonderful piece, but the connections for the point, or the pendant itself, are way over here and way over here. So this is extremely stable. It's just going to lay there and stay put, and all of the focus is on the pendant on this. This one has a little bit of wiggle to it, but again, I chose to take a bail that's a little bit longer to extend it away from the chain. The chain is just a snake chain and it's not really part of the piece. So I wanted to extend this bail so that it brings your eye down into this and then your focus is here, not on the chain. This one, I wanted you to look at the center of gravity. Look where it's attached, way over here. And then by using the tube, this one becomes a little bit more stable. This one is going to be stable anyway. It's not going to flip over because these pieces are so long. But this tube means that it's also just not going to rock back and forth so much. So the point of attachment, though, is way over here because that's where the center of gravity is to make it hang properly. This one is meant to turn around. This is just a piece of silver with the holes drilled in it. And this one flips around and it'll flip front to back. It'll flip around different sides unless one side is significantly heavier than the other, but it's just going to flip all over the place, and it was designed to, and it's fine. This one is very stable and can be a really beautiful piece if you use 2 textures on that. This is another Allison Antleman one. Notice the connections up here, and she's got it so that this is not going anywhere. It's going to stay absolutely stable the way she's got this connected. And that's it for the slides. So in closing, what I want you to think about is I want you to think about engineering these things, but not until you've made all those decisions about thinking about where the pendant fits on that neck wire. You need to think about how you want it, how much you want it to move, whether you want it to be able to flip over, if you want it to turn. And then once you make all those decisions, then you go in and figure out how to engineer it. Okay, so that's kind of the lesson for today. And especially when you're designing, I really want to stress that I think one of the things that happens with a lot of students is that you get caught up in the engineering of it. You get caught up in the, how am I going to make this work and what am I going to make it out of? And when you're designing, that is not a time to think about that. When you're designing, I think you need to be absolutely free to think about anything you want, design anything you want. And you might have to rein it in, you might not, but you can do the engineering after the fact, and you can do the what am I going to build it out of after the fact. But doing that at the time that you're designing really inhibits you. So if you can stay away from that, if you can just think about, do I want it to wiggle? Do I want it to be still? Do I want it to be flip over? Do I want it to be a bead that turns all the time? Do I want it, whatever I want it to be, make it, design it that, and then figure out how to make it do that. And it's not as hard as you think, especially approaching it that way. So anyway, have fun with your engineering your pendants. And thank you for joining me today on Studio Time with Deb, the online version. And I hope to see you next week.